Welcome back to the Chicagolandians, a casual Chicago sports podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Cunningham, joined by my co-host, Connor Cunningham.
We're two brothers from the Chicagoland area talking about the latest and greatest in Chicago sports news.
Welcome back to another episode of the Chicagolandians. I'm your host, Patrick Cunningham, joined as always by the wonderful Connor Cunningham.
Hello.
On today's episode, we're going to do a little bit of a shorter episode, a little bit of a sweet piece, a little thing.
Oh, okay.
Where we are going to be covering the Bulls' recent draft pick, number 11, Modest Buzelis. Out of the G League, out of Ignite. We're going to be covering who the man is and what he can do for the Bulls. And we're also going to be covering a little bit of news related to Chicago Blackhawks and the Chicago Bulls. So minimal Bears news today.
Yes, very minimal Bears news right now. I don't think anything's come out of Hard Knocks yet. There's a little news about the stadium that we can dive into later. I think the biggest piece is Tyreek Stevenson and Braxton Jones faced off each other in the American Cornhole League Celebrity Charity Tournament.
I didn't see this.
Yes, screamed across my desk. But yes, that is something to note. But that's about it. It's kind of a slow day at the office. But I do believe this is the first time that Blackhawks news or Bulls news has made it onto the show. So it's quite a groundbreaking time.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is big. We're starting to diversify a little bit. I know we started hot with White Sox news, but we got to start moving into Bulls. I mean, I think Bulls are an exciting time right now. Blackhawks maybe need a little bit more time to mature.
Ooh, wow. Exciting time for the Bulls, you think, right now? That might be a hot take.
Well, we'll get to it. You know,
Okay.
We could talk about it. But getting started with the news, the first bit of news that we've got, ice skating across my desk, we have Pat Williams just got an extension, 5 years, $90 million. If you're doing the math there at home, that's $18 million a year. Now, here's the biggest surprise of the night for me. Pat Williams is 22 years old, which is insane. I think he's been in the league for 4 years right now. So he was drafted when he was about 15 years old. And I mean, just insane how young all of these players are. Pat Williams, to my knowledge, has not necessarily panned out as the stellar player that he was drafted to be. I'm pretty sure he was drafted number 4 overall. I've heard Kawhi Leonard comparisons, who now makes about $40 or $50 million a year, and we just signed Pat Williams to pay him $18 million a year. But at 22 years old, I mean, hey, that's 1 year younger than me. I feel like I can change a lot in 5 years. So maybe he'll still pan out. Maybe he's still just a little bud waiting to blossom. Connor, what are your thoughts?
Well, that's something interesting that we're only paying Pat Williams $18 million a year when they're paying Kawhi Leonard 40. So from a value perspective, I think there's something there. But yeah, Pat Williams, he was like the first AK pick I feel like we had, or Arturas pick that we had. He didn't even start at Florida State, and I feel like when we drafted him, we thought that was weird. But we were kind of like, okay, maybe Arturas knows what he's doing here. And then, you know, he was bad his first year, and we were kind of like, okay, well, maybe he's going to develop. Okay. And then now he's due for a contract, and we signed him, and we're kind of still thinking like, okay. But yeah, I mean, he's 22. I guess NBA players are able to just phase through their first contracts without doing anything and get signed to a 5-year contract. Christian McCaffrey currently makes $16 million a year, and he's the best player in the NFL. So for Pat Williams to make $2 million more annually is pretty interesting. The Bulls are a sad team right now. The paw has not panned out, and I think it was a bust pick for sure. I mean, I would prefer Tyrese Halliburton over Pat Williams, probably. That's my opinion, but you know, maybe Pat Williams will turn into a monster.
I will just say I could cover the Bulls more, and I could research the Bulls more and understand them more. But I think maybe some of the moves indicate that the Bulls are on a more exciting and a rise, I would say. We also traded Alex Caruso, who was 30, for Josh Giddey, who is about, I think, 21 or 20. Now, Josh Giddey, he's had a lot of controversy around him already in the league, but I've heard that DeMar DeRozan is not going to come back next year, so I feel like we're aging down down, right? I think the next step would be getting rid of Zach LaVine, who currently makes $43 million and is one of the top 15 highest paid players in the NBA, and also figuring out Lonzo Ball, who currently makes $21 million a year and has not played the last 2 years. So that's a pretty good deal for Lonzo. But
yeah, but he had that chair video where he was standing up and sitting down in the chair.
I did see
showing
that,
off his
so
knee,
that's good.
which is impressive. Yeah, I would say that the Bulls, along with most Chicago sports teams, kind of sit at the precipice of falling into an abyss. It would be nice, honestly, if the Bulls tried to bottom out, because it's something that I feel like we struggle to do. We've picked from the 8th to 11th pick probably every year besides Pat Williams. So I really would like to see us like bottom out and trade LaVine, trade DeRozan, get rid of Vooch. I feel like there's all these players that we need to get rid of and tank, because I think Cooper Flagg is going to come in if we could somehow acquire Cooper Flagg. I just think the Bulls are such a depressing team. And like, yeah, I think DeRozan isn't coming back because he doesn't want to come back after the Bulls traded Alex Caruso. I don't really understand the move behind that. I'm not super loving what's going on with the Bulls, but I like the draft pick that we'll talk about later, but different opinions.
Well, I mean, I was just saying the idea that we're at least changing something, I think
That's
is
true.
better. We've stayed the same the last 3 or 4 years, have been paying 3 or 4 players a ton of money, and have just been the 8th seed border playoffs for a while. Maybe at least now, if we crash and burn and stink for a while, we can be like the Thunder and become a super young team that has a bunch of draft picks, but we'll see.
It's a good point. It's interesting. The wind is kind of coming out of DeBalzac. Maybe this is a sign that we'll actually do a good teardown, because we need that. But you know what? I do feel like the NBA is kind of a league where you can tear down forever and you don't necessarily get better. I feel like that's kind of interesting, because like the Pistons or like the Magic, I guess the Magic were in the playoffs, like
Magic were pretty good,
turn
yeah.
around. But like the Magic were perpetually bad for a long time and picked always at the top. I mean, the Pistons seemingly are just not doing well. And like, I feel like the value of draft picks is so different in the NBA. Like, I saw somewhere that we could have traded Drummond, who it was signed to the Sixers, but we were offered like 3 second-round picks for Drummond. Like, I think just like players don't pan out like ever in the draft, but we'll see what happens. If we get Cooper Flagg, then maybe we'll start competing again. But I do think you bring up a good point about, yeah, trying to at least do something different, I think is important for sure.
Dude, I'd love to see the stats on how many, like what percentage of NBA players pan out in the draft. I would bet it's like less than 10 out of the 50, 60 people drafted.
I mean, just look at all the Bulls players, yeah.
Seriously, yeah. So next little piece of news we got is Blackhawks star-stud young rookie Connor Bedard won the Calder Memorial Trophy, which seems Rookie of the Year coded. It is Rookie of the Year. Giving Rookie of the Year, which is very exciting. The Blackhawks finished 23-53, so 30 games under 500. So not very good. We ended up with the second pick in the draft this year, and we drafted Artem Levshanov out of MSU. So 2 very high draft picks. Maybe things are looking up, but the days of winning 3 Stanley Cups in the last 5 years are certainly behind us.
Man, most surprising thing to me is they play 76 games in an NHL season. I had no idea. That's brand new news to me. Also, man, some of these records in Chicago sports just really hit you in the chest. 23-53, that's tough. But it seems like this was, yeah, as you said, this is not a Bedard in this draft class, which I think is fine. But maybe him and Bedard will be the future of Chicago.
Did you pay attention to the Stanley Cup at all?
No, not super close. I mean, I know that the Panthers won, and I know it was pretty cool, like, to see the Oilers come back from 3-0. Like, definitely exciting for sure. I do think it's interesting. I mean, obviously there's no correlation to like the geographical location, but it's funny that Tampa Bay and Florida are seemingly the best teams always. I mean, I know it's not like that doesn't impact the ice or the players that they skate on, but I just think it's funny.
Well, yeah, it's different than like the Jamaica bobsled team.
Yeah, right.
It's like, just because you're in Florida doesn't mean you can only take players from Florida.
From Florida,
right?
Yeah.
But like, still in my mind, it doesn't make sense. It's like, where are they getting the ice? What are they skating on?
I agree.
Okay, but moving on to the main meat.
The meat and potatoes
of this podcast. We're going to be talking about Mattis Buzelis. We're going to give you some quick metrics about Zealous. He is 6'9". I saw listed at 6'10", but
I'm going to list him at 6'10".
6'9", 6'10". 6'9", 6'10". He is 19 years old. He has a standing reach of 8 feet, 10 inches. He went, this is less cool than I thought. 2 days ago, I thought he was a 4-year starter at Hinsdale Central. I'm now learning he was 1 year, his freshman year at Hinsdale Central, before he went on to go do bigger and better things. But he played his freshman year at Hinsdale Central, which longtime fans of the show remember that's the same high school that Kieran Amagage, Bears lineman out of Yale, went to. So, but I guess it's interesting. Well, I mean, he grew up in Chicago, so I guess he's still got the roots. But he later went on to play at Brewster and Sunrise Christian Academy.
But yeah, I think basketball is just kind of like one of those sports where players transfer around a lot to get opportunities to get in front of people. I think that senior year that he had was where he solidified himself as a possible, like, at that time, he was considered like the projected #1 pick before he would go into his G League Ignite season. But yeah, Lithuanian player. His mom and dad were both professional basketball players. Lithuania basketball is huge. People will remember Lithuania beat the U.S. men's team not too long ago in the FIBA tournament. Definitely an interesting player. Cool to see a guy born and raised in Chicago. He seemed super excited about being drafted by the Bulls. He was emotional. He said this is where he wanted to go. So I'm into that. I'm into Modest.
I like the idea of pre-season projected to be the #1 pick, and then now we get him at the 11. That seems like value, but also I think maybe it just means he didn't pan out. But like, he's 19, so it's hard to say. Obviously, when you're that young, people are kind of just looking at your physical attributes and what you could be and what you can grow to be, which I think is interesting. Currently reading Moneyball, which kind of talks about the revolution of scouting prospects. And it talks about in baseball, the old-fashioned was like the exact same thing that we see now with basketball, where it's all looking at physical attributes and what you could become and what you could grow to be, rather than looking at what you can do right now. So I wonder if there's going to be a little bit of a switch ever. Probably not, because the games are way different. Connor, you got anything to say about that? Or?
I think it is just interesting just because how the turnaround in these players, like, you know, LeBronster coming to the league after like graduating high school, the quick turnaround in these players. The time for projection is so small just because like the time between you get scouted in baseball versus coming into the league is 10 years maybe, but in basketball it's like 3 years possibly. If you get discovered in high school, you can be in the league in 2 years if you reclassify. I don't know. I think basketball is an interesting sport. It seems like some players, it's even in college too, where you have these players who like are successful collegiate basketball players and don't get buzz in the draft, where some people who like sit on the bench for most of the time during their collegiate seasons just live out their laurels of their high school basketball season. So
I guess moving into some of the things that Buzelis succeeds at, as we mentioned before, favored to be a very, very high draft pick going into his season in the G League because of his offensive abilities. In high school, he was a great three-point shooter, but then this season was below average shooting, had a disappointing season. So what stood out this year was his defensive abilities. He set the record for most blocks for Ignite, I believe, or like he set the team record for blocks in a single season. Showed that he was a great rim protector, which I think in the NBA is definitely something that'll set you apart. I think especially if you're kind of coming in, still developing as a young guy, if you can be the hustle player that's not a liability out there on defense, I think that'll take you far, which is maybe how somebody like Pat Williams sticks around for a while, or especially someone like Alex Caruso. Yeah, Connor, I'll let you touch on maybe his defensive abilities, and then we can move into his offensive abilities.
Yeah, for sure. So I think, rim protection is his biggest thing. He's a long defender. I've had comparisons to Russian basketball player Andrei Kirilenko, AK-47. He's a long guy with good shot blocking abilities, good rim protector, who I think early on, kind of like you mentioned here, I think defense will be his I don't think that's what people projected him to be, like going into his season, his G League season, to be as good of a defender as he is. But he does seem like a solid defender. I think physically he still has like a little bit to develop just from like a size perspective. I think from just watching the little bit of tape that I have, sometimes he can struggle with like bigger people who can get into his body sometimes. So I think like developing more mass and kind of like a stronger skill set is something that's going to be important for him. But yeah, I think he shows like good promise as like a shot protector, rim protector, rotational defense. I think he is solid in, okay in the pick and roll for defending, but I think he could work on that as well. But yeah, I think his defense, he profiles as a better defender than expected. I think that'll be an important part of his game, at least early on.
Put it in perspective, Buzelis is 6'9", 6'10", 209 pounds, and Caleb Williams is 6'1", 215 pounds. So, just imagine Caleb Williams and stretching him out 8 or 9 inches. You kind of get a pretty skinny build, but maybe he'll have kind of a Giannis transformation. But yeah, Connor, you just mentioned Andrei Kirilenko. I took a quick Google search of him, and I see he has this giant back tattoo of a World of Warcraft paladin, which I thought kind of tracks when you look at this.
That tattoo is sick. I had forgotten about this guy, and then I remember that he had gotten this tattoo, and his nickname is AK-47. Yeah. Two awesome facts about him.
So, I'll walk through some of his stats for his last season. So he averaged, in 34 games, he averaged 31 minutes per game. He averaged 14.1 points per game, almost 7 rebounds, 2 assists per game. Shot 45% from field goal. But then the thing that we mentioned before, he shot 26% from the three-point line, which is what really hurt his draft stock. Yes. So those are his main stats that I wanted to highlight. He looks pretty exciting. I watched him do some one-on-ones against Cooper Flagg. First of all, it's so cool to see huge players like 6'9", 6'10", being so dynamic and so athletic. Players at this level, even if they're just like the best high school players, the level of competition when you see them playing one-on-one, how they can create shots, the way that they use their bodies compared to, I think of my intramural game, I'm mostly rebound, put the ball back up, fast break, put the ball back up, but seeing how they can create shots for themselves and how they're so versatile, it's pretty cool to see. So he definitely passes the eye test, at least in the G League.
No, I agree. I think, offensively, I think his biggest critique is his three-point shooting. From my brief bit of research, I think it was actually kind of pointed out that his senior year of high school, I think, stood as an outlier in terms of three-point shooting. I'm shooting well from the three-point line. I think that's something that's still left to be desired or left to be discovered about Modest, if he can really become a true three-point shooter in the NBA. Because, he had a good season his senior year, but I think before that he struggled with the three-point line. I think this season he struggled with the three-point line, adjusting to the NBA line. So that, I think, is the most important thing that'll be see him develop. Reed Shepherd from Kentucky just got drafted 3rd overall, just as the best shooter. I don't know, shooting in the NBA is insane. So I feel like if he can develop that, I think that'll turn him into a great pick. But I think that leaves a lot to be desired. He said himself that if he shot 37% from the three-point line, he would have been a lock for the number 1, which is great. I mean, if I shoot 100% from the three-point line, I think I could also be the number 1 pick. But we can't just say that. But he is an explosive player, really good off ball and cutting. He finishes well with lobs and dunks. We put in the show notes, he jams it a lot. But as you mentioned, Pat, he's got a decent pull-up game as well. From a small sample size, but a good pull-up game, and can spot up in the off ball. And he likes that Dirk fade a little too. He likes doing that little one leg Dirk step back, which I like. It's a move I'm trying to learn right now in my game.
It's a good move.
It is a good move. It's one that I like to do. Also, along with the dunks, I kind of that's kind of my game too. Just kind of dunking around. Those are some of the positives that he has in his offensive game. I think, if you just look up his highlights, you'll see he's an explosive player. He's decent on the dribble. He's got a couple good highlights of making quick adjustments, quick crossovers, quick moves to get to the rim and create separation. So I think he does have a bag in terms of dribbling. Maybe not as well developed as he needs it to be, but where he's at right now, I think he's a solid offensive player. But I think shooting turns into his biggest question mark. Also, that video of Cooper Flagg playing against Buzelis, Cooper Flagg is 17 right now. So that video of Buzelis, he was probably either 16 or 17 at the time of that video, which is insane. Cooper Flagg was. Yeah, it's crazy.
What's also interesting is with these players being so young, they're so malleable with how they play. From my understanding, Buzelis kind of made a lot of changes to his jump shot his senior year and is now kind of still working out those mechanics now. And, they hope that throughout the season or in the next couple of years that it'll return to that senior year mechanics. And it's just so interesting compared to football, where you're getting drafted as not a finished product, but you're getting drafted closer to your physical peak, and you've done most of your growing. But basketball, there's so much unknown about what you can grow into and what you can become, that there's a lot more speculation, but there's also a lot more opportunities for him to like make these changes to his game or make these changes to his shooting form and hopefully become better.
Just get him with lethal shooter. Just get him with lethal shooter. Give him like a year with lethal shooter, and then he'll be a dynamic shooter. I think that's all he needs to
Get
do.
him
If he
a
can turn
rim
Drake,
with like a chainsaw on it,
Yes.
or like
Yes.
a bunch of spikes on it, and then we'll be good.
if he can turn Drake and Jack Harlow into great 3-point shooters, then Buzelis can become a great 3-point shooter as well.
Absolutely. Okay, Connor, you got anything else to add about Buzelis?
Yeah, so I guess some highlights of like things that he could work on. A little bit about like shot creation. I think sometimes he finishes a little too soft at the rim. He does like to dunk, but I feel like sometimes he has poor decision making where he kind of just throws himself, his shoulder into a player and tries to finish around the rim. Sometimes they just turn into ugly looking shots. Also, yeah, not super explosive like off the dribble. I feel like he's not a guy who's gonna like blow by somebody off the dribble, and sometimes he's a little like stale when he's dribbling. So I think some of those moves, he does have the ability to like, he's got that. The first play you'll probably see in his highlight tape is of him doing that crossover, cut to the rim and dunk, which is a great play. But I think maybe developing a little bit more of that game, and then also sometimes seeing the court. There's some good clips of him kind of like not seeing the whole court, maybe not making the easy pass or the best decision in some plays. So I think that's all something that he can work on. And finally, his on-ball defense as well. Like we mentioned, I think that can come with size. But yeah, just bigger offensive players getting into his body and working him. But I think these are all things that can definitely work on. As you said, I think he's got a lot of intangibles. He's got size and explosiveness, which I think are really great. And I think he could for sure develop into like a plus starter for the Bulls. And I think especially to fall to the 11, I think that was like good value on him. I think overall satisfied with the pick. Excited to see what he can come and turn into.
So to throw some player comps at you, we have Jeremy Grant. We also have Franz Wagner. Here's a funny one that I found online. Lamar Odom, who I feel like is not... What'd you say?
Lamar Odom, that's a funny comp.
Yeah, like I feel like Lamar Odom is not a player that you'd love to be compared to. I feel like he's not like... I guess I don't know enough about Lamar Odom. I feel like he was kind of nice for a little bit, but now I just think of him as a really old guy. And then also Tony Kukoc, who I thought was also another funny comp. When if you just look up photos of Tony Kukoc, I mean, you can see the comparisons. They're both super tall, skinny white guys. But
wow, if he blooms into a Tony Kukoc, oof, man, what the Bulls have stumbled into.
Carney, got anything else to add about Montes?
No, I think I don't have anything else to say. I'm excited to see where he is. If you're listening to the podcast, we'd love to have you on and give you a couple of interview questions, hear about your journey. But yeah, no, I don't think I have anything else to add to him.
Okay, sweet. So that'll do it for today's episode. This is a little piece. We want to just do a little breakdown of who the Bulls drafted, give you a little player breakdown in a digestible manner. If you guys liked this episode, why not check out our other episodes? You can find us on YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, at Chicagolandians. Why not leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify? Preferably a 5-star, but if not,
Only
maybe
5
just let us know
stars.
how you feel. Maybe just let us know how you feel. As always, thanks again for watching. Thank you for watching. And as always, bear down.
Bear down, baby.
Woo.